So go. Welcome back, friends. We're reading chapter 11 today of Mad Bear, The Ring. All this about sin and evil and fear and everything doomed to hell. They use this image as a doom image, invoking doom. Chautauqua is the name of the lake, explained our driver. You'll see it when we get there. It borders the property. Actually, the word is Seneca for bag tied in the middle, or so we're told. It's hard to think how one word could mean all that, but it's obviously a native word, and this is Seneca territory. The lake's shaped like a kidney bean or a peanut or something, and they say it reminded the Senecas of this type of bag that they used to carry that was tied in the middle. So they named the lake after the bag, I guess, and then the place got its name from the lake. I was on my way to spend a week as a guest speaker at this New York resort accompanied by a student from Hong Kong named Victor Lam. Rolling Thunder had been selected as Book of the Year by the Chautauqua Book Club, and I had been engaged for a series of talks for the Adult Education Summer Program. As part of the arrangement, accommodations, meals, and complimentary admission to all of the seminars and performances had been offered for me and my assistant. Since Masayuki was returning to Japan, a Berkeley friend had introduced me to Victor Lam, suggesting that this would be an ideal opportunity for an exchange student such as he. Victor was free for the summer, and he gladly came along as volunteer assistant. Our driver was a member of the staff at the Chautauqua Resort, and she had come to pick us up at the airport. "Have you been here before?" she asked. "I've never even heard of Chautauqua," I admitted, until just some weeks ago. Actually, I had heard the word as a child. My mom traveled for years as a stage actress long before I was born, and she used to talk about traveling on Chautauqua, but I guess that's something different. "No, it's related," she alleged, "but I'm not just sure how. Chautauqua dates back more than 100 years, I think. Once it was a nationwide society with tent camps and performances all across the country. It was named after this place here, which was originally a training center for Sunday school teachers. They say it was really strict, almost like a prison. Well, it's certainly different now. It's a fantastic educational and cultural resort. There are movies and live plays and musicals going on all the time, and concerts and performances by top entertainers. But the main emphasis is still educational. Classes and lectures in art and music mostly." "Victor here is originally from Hong Kong," I interjected, "but currently he's an art major at the California College of Arts and Crafts. We've been told there'll be a number of exhibits and demonstrations that he'll be able to attend." "Oh, definitely," she affirmed. "There'll be lectures and demonstrations by lots of famous painters and sculptors. He'll be welcome to attend anything he wants. You're both guests here, so everything is open to you whenever you're free. You'll be surprised if you've never been here before. I don't know how much they've told you, but there's an unbelievable amount of activity all summer long. People come from all over, all through the summer. There are no less than 10,000 patrons on the grounds here." We were taken to the guest house where the speakers and performers were accommodated and introduced to the hostess of the house. As soon as we had been shown to our rooms, we were escorted with the other guests to the formal and fancy dining room in the hotel across the street. Here we had 3 abundant meals a day, in the same assigned seats at the same table with the same group. Each evening at supper time, everyone at our table was allowed to select 2 desserts from a long list of exotic choices. And since some people, especially the dancers, were avoiding desserts altogether, Victor and I always had several. Chautauqua was like an entire village of resorts, hotels, restaurants, theaters, and auditoriums. The theaters, shops, lodges, including our guest house, looked quaintly old-fashioned, as though they were as old as Chautauqua's long history. There were so many exhibits, shows, and concerts going on all day and evening that when we found ourselves free to attend an event, it was difficult to decide what to do, or what not to do. Victor brought his camera to almost all my talks and meetings, as he was studying photography in college and wanted to consider himself my official documenter. But I managed to persuade him to attend a few lectures and art exhibits on his own. we became acquainted with our hostess' son, who was a student about Victor's age. He and his college friends were on summer break and were spending nearly every evening hanging out in the family quarters downstairs. One evening, after we finished our supper, our hostess invited us to join them in the recreation room in the basement. Her son and 4 of his friends were sitting around a table having milk and cookies, and we sat on the basement stairs to talk with them. One of them noticed my ring and asked to look at it. I had become so accustomed to wearing it, both day and night, that I had virtually forgotten about it. I slipped it off and held it in the palm of my hand, and I began to tell them the story of how it had simply one day appeared in my drawer. Since they seemed interested, I supposed it would be all right to tell them the truth. Took the ring from my hand and held it up to the light. With her other hand, she reached to flick the ashes from her cigarette and knocked the ashtray off of the banister onto her lap. As she stood up to brush off the ashes, she set the ring on the table. One of the students reached across the table to pick it up, and his arm bumped the pitcher of milk. The pitcher tipped over and the milk spread across the table and dripped onto the floor. The son brought a roll of paper towels from the other room, and everyone got busy wiping up milk. Another student picked up my ring as he was returning to his seat. With his eyes on the ring, he sat on the corner of its chair, and both he and the chair fell to the floor. Everyone laughed, and one student exclaimed, "You better give that ring back." The fallen one stood up and handed me the ring, and I slipped it back on my finger. Later, I told Victor about the filmmaker with the Rolling Thunder review and what he had said about the ring. I wondered out loud whether I should take off the ring and put it out of sight. "I've heard about something like that," Victor said. "All Chinese people are hearing about such things, but still, I don't like to believe in it." The following afternoon, our hostess questioned me as we relaxed in the sitting room after my morning talk. Someone had provided her with a copy of Rolling Thunder. In case she had wanted to read it before I arrived. And thus she had questions about the medicine people. She wanted to know if indeed Mad Bear would be coming to visit, and if so, when. When Mad Bear learned of my Chautauqua agenda, he had suggested that he might drop by, as he had put it. Since he was within driving distance, he could easily come for a day or two if I would phone him to confirm the arrangements. Our hostess had assured us he would be welcome to stay at the guest house, and now she was looking forward to meeting him. She was sure that he had something to do with my ring and its curious effect on people. But I was certain that the ring had no connection with Mad Bear. As far as I knew, Mad Bear was not even aware that I was wearing it. If he had noticed it, he had never mentioned it. The only strange thing about it was the way I had come by it, I told her, and I had never before known it to have any effect on anyone. "Well," she said, "when Mad Bear comes, I'm going to ask him about it. I can't understand why you haven't discussed it with him. I believe in things like this, and these are the type of people that know about things like this. I'll bet you'll never let anyone hold it before, right? So naturally, you wouldn't have seen any effects like that." Mad Bear and I talked by phone every day during my week at Chautauqua. He always asked me how the talks were going, and said, "Well, give my greetings to everyone." And I almost always did. He was uncertain about coming to Chautauqua. He had received some sort of communication from India, and he was expecting visitors, but he was not sure when they would appear. They arrived at Mad Bear's place on our 5th day at Chautauqua. "I won't be able to make it down there now," he said. "They'll be here 3 or 4 days for sure, and you only got a couple more days down there, right? We'll have to make it next time. Just give my best regards to everyone." His visitors were a group of Tibetan monks and lamas. They had been sent from Dharamsala by the Dalai Lama, with whom Mad Bear maintained an ongoing association. "In fact, I wish you were up here," Mad Bear went on. "Then you could see these people. But by the time you get to New York City and up on here, they'll have left already. Too bad. Such high-spirited people and yet so humble. Just like the real people. And they got a sense of humor. Boy, I'm telling you, just like the Dalai Lama himself. Well, like me too, as far as that goes. And they sit right down on the floor, right here in my funny little room. And they get to laughing. You know me, with my weight, I can't sit on the floor. I get down and I can't get up. They'd have to lift me up. Wouldn't that be something? But I'm telling you, they talk so warm-hearted and get to laughing so beautifully. I just want to be right down there on the floor with them. So anyways, when are you coming? We're leaving here this weekend, I told him. We'll be up there sometime next weekend, Sunday I guess. I'll phone you from New York. Listen, one more thing I want to tell you. We've been comparing notes up here, mostly on our ancient prophecies. We can talk about that when you're up here. And we're in agreement on our predictions in China. There's going to be a lot of changes in China, but the problems are going to go on, and the situation with Tibet is only going to get even worse. Except they'll get more support, more awareness, I guess you could say. There's one nearby thing that's coming right up. That's what I wanted to tell you. You watch the news. You'll be in New York City, I guess, right around Friday or Saturday next week. There's going to be an earthquake in China. I mean, major. It'll be in the news, I'm sure. Between us here, we've pinned it down pretty good as to the timing. Do you think I should mention anything about that here? You mean in your talk? Just to a couple friends, maybe. You can use your judgment. Such things, when they're close to home, we don't do it, you know. Your people, they just don't want to hear it. They don't deal with things that way. They're not used to it, so it doesn't do any good. A distant thing like this, they don't have to deal with it personally, so they don't have to argue about it. They can just let it go, wait and see. They might be a little amazed for a while that someone told them in advance and then it came out on the news. But they won't learn anything from it. We've seen how that works. They don't learn how to foresee things, you know. They just don't want to learn it, so they'll never know. I don't know, I said. One young guy here came up from the audience after my session the other day and handed me a note. He was so angry or disturbed that he was actually shaking. He said, "You promised to share the Indian prophecies and give us the predictions on the natural disasters." His note said the same thing. It said, "That's what we came to hear, and it's not yours to keep to yourself." I don't know where he got that idea. I didn't claim to know any predictions or promise to reveal anything. In fact, I've been really careful here, just talking about culture, traditions, and the planet, without getting into anything too ominous. I think most people here are the type who'd say, "You mustn't talk about anything negative." "See, that's what gets me," Mad Bear rejoined. "People are hard to figure. They either declare you don't know what you're talking about, or they don't want to hear it anyways. Or they expect you to give them the whole upcoming scenario, as though it's all been written down in detail somewhere. In the first place, if it was all determined, there'd be no point in working on it. We just close our eyes and let it happen. There's those who want to know, but they don't want to work on it. And the others, they don't even want to know. It's not what you can see coming. It's what you can see yourself doing about it. Otherwise, it's best not to know. You just get scared and add to the predicament. That was my point in bringing up those dreams about California. My only question was what we ought to do about it. Even this thing in China, it wouldn't have to be, but we sure don't see anybody doing anything about it. I'll tell you one thing. There are precarious, few people holding back earthquakes and floods and such things these days. It makes it pretty rough. That's going to have to change pretty darn fast. In my last talk at Chautauqua, I paraphrased as much of those words of Mad Bear's as I thought most important and most appropriate. For those who are expecting others to share their prophecies, I thought it would be useful to know that those others were expecting them to share responsibility. To members of the staff who were disappointed in not being able to meet Mad Bear, I suggested that they consider inviting him on his own sometime, and, of course, I'd be pleased to come with him. The week at Chautauqua had been a pleasure. It was an exciting place, absolutely rich with images, ideas, and inspiration. I did tell everyone I hoped to return, and I meant it. Before leaving for the airport, we walked around to say goodbye to whomever we could find in the guest house. One of the college students we had talked to was in the kitchen in the basement standing with another friend. "Show this guy your ring," he piped up as soon as he saw me. "He wasn't here the other day." I hesitated, but I thought it would look strange to refuse. I was hoping it might be hard to remove, thus providing an excuse. But it slipped instantly off my finger the moment I touched it, and I handed it over. The young man turned to hold the ring under the light above the stove and backed into a large glass dish on the edge of the counter. There was a hot casserole and broken glass all over the floor, and he was horrified. His friend seemed delighted. "That's what I thought," he exclaimed. "That proved exactly what I thought." I took the ring back and put it in my pocket. They wanted to talk about it, but fortunately, our ride was waiting and we had to leave. Also fortunately, our hostess had not been there to see that, and I did not have to discuss it. I did think about it several times, but I put the ring in my toilet kit and did not look at it again. Perhaps I would discuss it with Mad Bear. We got our usual reduced weekly rate at the Lexington Hotel in New York City. I had become a familiar sight at the Lexington. I had been here several times by now, most recently with Masayuki, before we had flown out to Arizona. No doubt there were many who stayed there more frequently than I, certainly the airline personnel who were contract regulars. But I had made myself conspicuous when I had nearly filled the place with natives who had walked about the halls and the lobby in their traditional regalia. "Where are all the Indians?" asked one of the employees as I stepped up to the cashier's window. "They're all home," I answered. "Well, you never change," he said. "You look the same every time I see you." "You never change either," I told him. "We can't change. We have to keep the pace here." The earthquake in China happened on Saturday. Saturday our time, at any rate. And Victor and I saw it on the news in our room. I told Mad Bear on the phone that he was right about the earthquake. "I know," he acknowledged. "When are you heading up here?" "Tomorrow. We'll be staying at the Ramada in Niagara Falls." "That's good," he said. "Easy to get to from my place, and they've got a really good restaurant in there. I mean, for you guys, you know. Look, we can meet on Monday. We're having a get-together, a bunch of our people in the park there in Niagara Falls. I'll pick you guys up. We can have a little bite to eat there in the restaurant, although we'll be having a picnic and there'll be plenty for you guys. Well, we won't be going hungry anyways." The following morning, we flew into Buffalo and took the shuttle bus to the hotel in Niagara Falls. Since we had the rest of the Sunday to ourselves, I suggested we walk across the Rainbow Bridge to the Canada side of the falls. Victor carried his camera, and we stopped on the bridge to watch the little boats that took raincoat-clad tourists close enough to be splashed by the falls. "We can get good pictures from here," Victor said. "I think if we were in that boat, the lens would get wet, and we wouldn't get clear pictures." "Wait till we get to the other side," I told him. "You can get the best pictures of the falls from over there." But Victor was stopped at the Canada end of the bridge and was not allowed to pass. I was surprised. It had never happened before. "We'll just be a couple hours," I explained. "We're just going right over there to take some pictures." "Not from Hong Kong, he doesn't get in," insisted the man in the uniform. "You can go to Buffalo and try to get a visa, if you want, but with that Hong Kong passport, I doubt it." "Why is that?" I questioned. He frowned at me. "That's the rules," he said, with a tone of finality. "That's the way it is." Victor looked uncomfortable. "Never mind," he said. "Let's go back." The next day, I told Mad Bear what had happened, and it became a topic of discussion at the picnic. Apparently, these traditionals, like Mad Bear, made it a point to be indignant at the very idea of a border. "If you don't mind knowing something about the history of this land," one of them told Victor, "and you'll never learn it from the white folks, and they came along and made that split right through our land where we are already living. That's an artificial border, and as far as we're concerned, we don't even like to recognize it." "Every border is artificial," submitted another. "It's an unnatural notion and don't have no recognition in the natural world. The animals and birds and the wind and the water, They don't pay no attention to these so-called borders. We're the ones it ought to be up to, as far as that goes, and we say we're welcome anywheres in the whole 6 nations. We'd give you your own stamp in your passport, except we don't use such a thing. Don't need it. Tell you what you do, offered an elderly woman who had been listening and nodding. You come on over with us. We'll tell them you're one of us, one of our relations, and that wouldn't be lying neither. Hey, said Mad Bear, wait a minute, by golly, that's not a bad idea. We'll bring him with us on the crossing. How long you guys going to be here? Every year, members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and perhaps many others, marched en masse north over the bridge across the Canadian border. I was not certain whether they considered the annual event a powwow, a celebration, or a protest march. In a way, I suppose it was all of these things. In any case, as far as I knew, it had always been allowed, even though at other times many natives had either been held or harassed at the border. Victor's going back tomorrow, I told him. He has to get ready for school. He just wanted to come meet you while he was up this way. Since you didn't make it down to Chautauqua, Canada was just an incidental idea. We just wanted to look at the falls. It's better from over there. I know, but I wish he could stay for the crossing. You know, I'm planning on staying for a few more days, but not that long. I can't stay up till the crossing. Well, that wasn't the point. You can cross any time you want. Tomorrow he's going back. Best thing we can do for him in a case like this is to go ahead and have one heck of a picnic here. We did. There was an abundance of food, and Victor must have eaten a little more than he had actually wanted. It's the native way, Mad Bear had urged him. Whenever someone offers you something, it's kind of the best thing to just go ahead and accept it. Everyone wants you to remember your time with us, brief as it is. They all went on talking about how they wished Victor could have stayed for the crossing, and how good it would feel to be able to host their own visitors in their own land, and not be interdicted by this imaginary border through their own homeland, a border that in their reckoning ought not even to exist. After the picnic, Mad Bear offered to take us back to the Ramada and also to drive us to the airport in the morning so that I would not need to take the shuttle back and forth. Victor thanked everyone for inviting him to their picnic. This here is a confederacy where you're at right now, one of them declared, pointing a finger at him, and we don't recognize no lines drawn or barriers put up nowheres among these 6 nations, not for us or anyone. So you just know you're welcome here anytime at all, you and any of your people, and these folks here will back me up on that. We checked out of the Ramada Hotel in the morning, and after we saw Victor off at the airport, I returned with Mad Bear to his place. He had a little teardrop trailer parked in the back of his house, where I could sleep for the next couple of days. It was an old and mostly gutted, but it has somewhat comfortable bed. Well, I got it for a song, Mad Bear explained, or a song and a half anyways. I got electricity hooked up and I plugged in a little radio for you. You'll be snug as a bug at night. Your own bedroom. Rest of the time, you don't need to hang out in there anyways. First thing we gotta do here, we gotta try and rustle up something tasty. That's not gonna be too hard. You should have been here to see the llamas, Mad Bear said as we sat at the table. I told you about them. They sure got a sense of humor. You would have liked them. They gave me gifts too, rugs and stuff. I'll show you later, after we eat. Main thing, we talked about some pretty important stuff. We always compare the records and the prophecies when we get together with the Tibetans. They're pretty much the same because we're the same people, you know, from the same original roots. And we talked about China and some various events upcoming. I told you all that. Right, I said. Just then there was a knock at the door. Mad Bear seemed not to notice. Someone's knocking at the door, I told him. I know, he said. I'm picking up who it is. Then he grinned and stood up. You excuse us for a bit. It's nothing important, but he's come from a ways. I'll try to cut it off pretty quick. It was one of his friends from another reservation, and I waited for what felt like several hours while they played many games of chess. I could only sit and watch and contemplate whether I ought to practice and improve enough to be able to play with Mad Bear. Perhaps I might take a brief nap out in the trailer. Mad Bear looked up from his game as though hearing my thoughts. You going out to the trailer? He asked. Why? No, I was just wondering. Where's your ring at? You're not wearing it. I thought maybe it was with your things out in the trailer. Good grief, I thought to myself. I was planning on saying something about the ring when the time was right. I didn't know Mad Bear had ever noticed it. I think your ring's out there in the trailer. Why don't you go out and get it and put it on? We're about to wind up here, soon as I whip him just one more time. No, Bear, said his friend. Bet I'll whoop you, then it's a draw, and then you want to go around again. I had wanted to bring it up. As soon as I went back to the house, Mad Bear and his friend were just coming out. So I got one up on ya, Mad Bear said. What'd I tell ya? Just one. Then you says, we better quit. That's the way you are, Bear. Mad Bear walked him to his car and watched as he pulled out of the driveway, raising his arm high over his head to wave as he always did. He looked at my hand as we walked back to the house. So you got it on again, he remarked. What'd I tell you? Suppose I ought to get me one like it. I know how to get one. I could get one to show up here, and then we'd both have one. We could say we belong to the same outfit, only you don't belong to it yourself, so the question is, what are you going to do with it? I was going to talk with you about this, I said, but what is it? I mean, what outfit? Can't you see what this is? Here, give it to me. I handed him the ring, and he sat down behind his trading post desk and glared at it with a frown. This is Adam and Eve here. This is the tree here, and the snake, and this little apple. This is not my thing. Not my thing at all. All this about sin and evil and fear and everything doomed to hell. This is a cult ring, is what it is. They use this image as a doom image, invoking doom. But it's nothing to you. Nothing one way or the other. I mean, you can wear it if you want to. It won't do you a thing. I realized he was holding the ring, and I had not yet had a chance to tell him about the others. I started to tell him, but he stopped me. No, I know, he said. I don't care about that. You're going to tell me all this stuff, and then you're going to want me to deactivate it. Well, I wasn't but then why talk about it? Anyways, I can deactivate it, but then it won't look for the birds, and you might not want to wear it. You want to look good, don't you? Don't you want to look nice? I had learned to tell when Mad Bear was holding back a laugh, even when his face seemed serious. He looked at me as though he were waiting for me to say something. Well, it's up to you. What? I asked. Okay, we'll show you. It works like this. He held up the ring in one hand, and he stuck out the index finger on his other hand in my direction. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he touched the fingertip to the tip of his nose and gave the ring a quick tap as though it were hot, and let it drop upon the desk. Now just look at the poor thing, he said, picking it up and handing it to me. Picking it up to hand to me. It was foggy, smoky brownish black. It was indeed ugly to see, almost nauseating. Mad Bear let go his laughter. It's neutralized, he said. Pathetic as anything and one heck of an eyesore. Not only that, but it doesn't look too good either. It ought to be ashamed of itself. You better hide it. I put the ring in my pocket, and as soon as I was out in the trailer for the night, it went back into my toilet kit, wrapped in a tissue. But I had to look at it closely first, under the light, to confirm it was still ugly. In my sleep, I heard someone singing in a strange, almost forlorn tone of voice. For a moment, it blended with my dream, although I wasn't sure what I was dreaming. I seemed to ask myself, what is this? And then I woke up. It was a clock radio near my head, and it was playing a song that I had been hearing almost too often recently. Someone's knocking at the door. Open the door and let him in. Mad Bear had no doubt used his radio for himself and set it to awaken him early. It was earlier than I would ordinarily choose to awaken, but I was at his place and he was probably already up and about, preparing some huge breakfast most likely. I got up and got dressed. For some reason, before I went inside, I took the ring out, looked at it again, and set it on top of the radio. During breakfast, I went on repeating to myself, someone's knocking at the door. Open the door and let... I tried to stop it, That song had awakened me, kept going through my mind. You know what I was hearing? Mad Bear piped up, just like an echo floating through my head. Remember yesterday when Freddy dropped by for chess? You said, someone's knocking at the door. That was going through my mind now, just like an echo. I was hearing that song in my... I started, Mad Bear, you keep telling me what I'm thinking. I'll be thinking to myself, and then you always... No, not always. I'm just tuned into you in a way. I told you that. You can prevent it, don't you know that? Anytime something feels private to you, I can't get to it. It's not that I'm trying. I'm not peeking into your head. Anyways, it's not always. If it was always, we wouldn't have to sit here and talk out loud. Well, I'd probably still have to. Me too. I have to ask you questions. Don't I ask you questions? You can pick up on me, maybe. What do you suppose I was thinking here just a moment ago? Who was I thinking about? Jison, I said. Then I wondered why I said that. I faintly pictured a man with serpents about his head. See, there you are. That's exactly right. I was thinking about Jison. It was a guess, I told him. You said who, so I said Jison. Well, you were right, all the same. I was sitting here thinking about Jison and why he came to the States here, wanting to get with healers and all and working on the bigger picture. And I was relating it, tying it in with that Shinto priest. The one with the serpents. I know. You remember what he said? And we were all thinking the same thing, have been for a long time. Maybe the time is getting close. He said we've got to join together, travel in person and actually meet up together so we can make a powerful force. Those of us in physical form. That's how he put it. The spirit guides give us this duty. To get together in physical form. But it's got to be the medicine people and the leaders of the sacred ways and not the politicians or the big business bosses. They can't do it. Because we're not talking about business and selling here. We're talking about healing. We're talking about those who follow the sacred paths, not those who just play Monopoly with each other. It's not to the point to communicate technologically. That's what he said. I remembered that. I made a note of that. I remember, I acknowledged. You know why that is? There's got to be the contact. There's got to be the ceremony. You have to generate spirit power. You can't make medicine over the wires. Even when they get to where you can send the voice and the picture all the time, it's still not enough. You can't do enough with it. Now, there's some of us, and I think you realize it, who travel in other ways and don't always transport the physical part. But it's still getting together. It's different. Communication includes communion and community. It's not just passing information around. Technological communication could get to be a problem, make things even worse, if it cuts back on the actual travel. People have to push for the actual physical contact. The electronics could just be to set it up, open the door, and that's all. He paused and looked thoughtful, and in his thoughtfulness, he picked up a huge glazed donut and bit off at least half of it. We could do something on this, he went on, swallowing hard. We could make this a kind of project. Let's give it some thought. I'm going to jot some notes on this so we can think about it. We thought about it and talked about it, off and on, over the time that I had left. We could call a meeting, he kept saying. One day, I think we'll do that. We could host it really good. All different people on all their different paths, gathering from all directions to talk about what we can do together. It seemed that when we talked, we were usually sitting at the table and almost always eating or munching on something. At least, Mad Bear was. When I could not keep up with him, I tried to make it look as though I was. But with this sort of talk, he got restless, and he could not stay at the table. When he thought about travel, he always got restless, so he kept getting up and down, and we kept going in and out, sitting on the metal bench or on his porch or walking around in the yard. As we walked around the ankle-high grass, I wondered when Mad Bear was planning on cutting it. I considered asking him whether I could cut it for him, but it was a lot of lawn and it was getting late and I was leaving in the morning. I was just thinking about the little people, he said. Maybe you were kind of picking up on that. No, I was just thinking about the long grass, I told him. You might have gotten a glimpse of some little nature spirits or something. The little people rarely run through here, but you can pretty near always see them when they come around. The little elementals, on the other hand, they're always around, but they're darn hard to catch a glimpse of. Now, the little people, they're different. They have a similar line of evolution like us, and we actually have a bit of contact with them from time to time. They came into my head, so I thought maybe it came from you. The little people. I'll show you something when we get back in the house. But you're right, I do have to call this kid about that grass, 'cause I don't want to have to mow it myself. Funny, he hasn't come around. We were standing in the driveway about where he was waving to his friend after he'd won the final game of chess, and again he was looking at my hand as he had done before. Looks like that ring is still put aside, and I guess this time it's my fault. You're just not going to feel like wearing it the way it looks now, isn't it? Yeah, but I don't mind. I don't need to wear it. Well, but you could. Anyways, why don't you get it and bring it in the house again? We ought to straighten it out and not leave it like that. I brought the ring into the house and handed it to him again. It looks awful like this, he said. Might as well throw it away if it's going to look like this. We can clear it up now and it'll stay okay. Then you can wear it or not. But I'm telling you, I'm still not going to get me one. I could, but I'm not. He held up the ring so that I could see that it had resumed its original appearance. But he took a cloth and rubbed it. We'll just shine it up a bit more. Too bad it's not silver. That'd be impressive, in case you wanted to look really sharp. You can wear it now, though, if you like. It won't hurt anything, no way or the other. I took the ring and I put it on. He looked at me and grinned. Now I'm thinking about something. You try and pick up what I'm thinking. But he pointedly glanced around the kitchen, giving it away. Eating, I said. Well, but say supper time. Supper time. In the morning, I packed up my suitcase and brought it into the house. Mad Bear was going to drive again to the airport in Buffalo, though I had insisted I'd be willing to jump on the bus. You want anything more before we head out? No, I'm fine. I don't need a thing. Well, you'll get something on the plane, I guess. Oh, here, before you go, I almost forgot. I was going to show you something here. He sat down behind his desk and slid open a drawer. This thing is for real, he said, taking a key and unlocking a small case. But you can't tell that for sure just by touching it. There are ways, however, to confirm this chemically, if anyone doubts it. Our people know from direct experience. This is a human skull. I'm going to let you hold it, but I'm going to ask you not to go spreading this around. Most people wouldn't believe you in the first place, but as far as an interest in investigating it, it means that reporters and everything else. Without waiting for me to reply, he handed me the object. It was a tiny skull. It did look like a human skull, teeth and all, and it did look like bone, except, as he had said, I could not be sure by touching it. But it was only about as large as a ping-pong ball. These little people are about 9 inches tall. They live here the same as we do, and many of our people have seen them. We don't go digging up graves and collecting bones like the white people do to us. I wouldn't have this if they didn't want me to. It's a privilege to have it. Something like a memento, a tangible token testimony of their presence. But we don't talk about them much, and I guess you can figure out why. That is the end of chapter 11. Only 4 more chapters after this. Nyawa for listening, my friends. Take care.